going to be analyzing it to see whether or not I can cash flow as an affordable housing long-term rental. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look up the market rents for this property is 1103. And just so you guys remember, just in case you guys have not seen it before, if you look up the Greensboro Housing Authority 2025 payment standards, you can see right here that a two-bedroom payment standard is $1,247. And that would tell you that's the rent ceiling, right? Now, I have friends in Greensboro area who are investing right now in that area. So they tell me that they're getting about 1250 for the two bedrooms. Great. So if that's the case, usually if because of the rent reasonableness test, let me just show you what that is. Usually the rent reasonableness test asks you to take the lower rent of the two, right? This is the Housing Choice Voucher Program Guidebook. And you go to section 2.2. There's a section right here where it says that in conducting rent reasonableness, the PHA must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent for other comparable unassisted units. So obviously the size, unit type matters, right? You got to compare condos to condos, townhomes to townhomes, etc. So this means that you can't charge more in rent to somebody simply because they're a voucher holder. Now, if there are other Section 8 properties that are of similar conditions, so if it's looks pretty nice, I mean, this is like nice floors, nice bathrooms. I mean, this looks pretty solid, right? So if it's of this comparable quality and they're getting 1250, then you can argue that you can get 1250 rents. This number right here for 23 units within a half-mile radius, 0.45 to be exact, says that those rents are 1103. But I don't know whether or not this 1100 average number is representative of the conditions of the home. So that's something you got to be worried about, right? So for me, because I have better information, I'm going to use 1250. If I did not have better information and I saw this, I would use this number as my rent estimate every single month for my underwriting assumption. So let's put some numbers in. $115,000 for the property's rehab number on this property. I'm going to assume that I don't need to do much. I usually, for single family homes, I put in some roof repairs. I don't think that's the case here because I'm paying an HOA fee, and the HOA fee typically will cover some of the expenses related to it will cover some of the expenses related to the roof repairs. Just in case there's any patchwork needed, it's already being reserved against. Now, for the toilets, I typically replace the toilets with high pressure flush toilets. I have two of them. I have them at all my rental properties right now for my short term rentals, and I've never gotten a toilet call before. So I'm going to keep it that way. I'm going to replace that using this. Okay. So now I don't need to put a cage on my HVAC in this unit. So I just got a measly 1440 of renovation just in case there's some touch up paint that I need to do, right? There's always something. It shouldn't be nothing. So for my rent, I want to put in 1250 because that's what I got for information. For my payment calculator, I can pull up the property taxes right here where it says $55 for property taxes. And I got $45 for homeowner insurance. And I'm going to do equals 45 times 1.2 because I'm multiplying by 1.2 to add a 20% premium to the property because I'm assuming that insurance estimate is for a primary residence property. And if I'm using it as a investment property, then I'm assuming that the insurance premium are going to be higher. So hence why I am adding a little bit extra. Now, for my HOA dues, I'm going to put in 225 right here in B34. Great. I got 10% for my property management expenses. I got 5% for vacancy. Again, if you've been following what we were talking about, right, there's a big bill being passed right now that will put in new stipulations for how federal funding works for Section 8 and housing choice vouchers. Now, it's likely going to be up to the states to depend how to spend that money. But there's things like, hey, if you're an able-bodied person, you cannot be on rental subsidy for more than 2 years. Now, that might only apply to new folks, not folks that are already on existing vouchers. So there's a lot of unknowns right now. So that's why I'm always at least putting 5% vacancy because that represents roughly a empty month every 2 years ish. All right. You gotta put something there. So for my cash down to seller, I got 25%, and my down payment is gonna be my B4, which is my asking price, times 25%, which is 20,750. I got 4,000 $1,225 for my closing costs and $1,440. All right. For $86,000 for my finance amount, which is a result of my B4, which is my asking price, minus my down payment percentage in E19, that gives me 86.25K with a 6.875% interest rate. Let's do 7.5 because I just closed the other day at 7.875. So let's use that number instead. So if I rent this property out as a 2-bedroom for $1,250 and I bought this property at $115, right? I would cash flow $40 a month. That's a 1.4% return with a it's called 1,500. Just gonna round here. Rehab. Now, what if I can get this property for cheaper, right? Because now you got to figure out what is your buy box. What do you consider to be a deal, quote unquote? Now, let's say your target return was 8% cash on cash, right? In year one. That's kind of hard sometimes, but hey, let's say it's 8%. So in E9, right, watch what happens to E9 as I lower my asking price. Let's go to 100 grand. So I'm not 5% now. If I'm at 90,000, great. Now I'm at 8%. So that same property, if everything else stays constant, right, with a $1,500 rehab, 25% down, 7.88% interest rate, I can now cash for $177 a month because now that's a 7.8% return. Now, again, this is not investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. I'm just simply showing you how to put in the criteria that helps you determine whether or not something is a deal. And that's how you figure out what your criteria is, right, without taking any emotions in the deal. Now, let's say your interest rates drop the whole point. Let's say it goes 6.875%. And let me explain why. If you look at the 10-year, the 10-year treasury yield versus the 30-year mortgage interest rates, you're going to see right here that typically that spread was about 1.5 to 2%. But in the past year, because of all this volatility, because of all this uncertainty around tariffs, we saw the spread get as wide as like 3%. So that's why you're getting much, much higher interest rates. But if you have days where there are headline news and they are saying, hey, we got these trade deals done, no more tariffs are here, that spread can narrow, right? It can get a little bit more compressed. And that allows you to say, well, maybe I save half a point there. And then you pay attention to what's happening with the Federal Reserve, right? You have all this news about, hey, lowered interest rate, lowered interest rate. But everybody knows Jerome Powell is going to be leaving in a year. Well, what if Trump just starts saying, hey, and then again, I get this insight from Logan Monashami on Housing Wire. And there's this concept with the shadow Fed president where if you know who you're going to assign to be the federal chair, and you can go out to the market and say, hey, as soon as I get in, I'm going to start lowering interest rates. Okay, when that happens, then maybe you can easily save half a point without the Federal Reserve ever even needing to officially announce half a point, right? Because the bond traders, right, they are speculating based on what they anticipate the 10-year yield to be, based on economic data, headline data, inflation data, labor data. And that allows them to make those decisions. So easily you can get 1 point drop overnight. And if this drops overnight, look what happened, right? My buying power just went back up to 97 grand from $90,000, assuming everything else stays constant, because my interest rate dropped from 7.875 to 6.875 with a $1,500 rehab. I can still achieve a target return of 8% because now this is the 7.8. I'm cash from 188 a month, assuming I can still get 1250 for rents here. So now if your interest rate drops to 6.875, your buying power goes up to 97 grand. And that's how fast something can move overnight. So don't get caught sleeping on this, right? Stay on top of what's happening. Don't read into the headline news. Don't buy into the fear factors that just gets publicly disseminated all the time. Stick with the numbers, understand what's happening, and make wise choices. All right. I hope you all have an amazing Friday. Spend a quality time with your family and friends today. All right. That's what life is all about. I am going to see you tomorrow for day 652. Have a good one, everybody.